Hello, I'm Jonathan Dunsky, author of the Adam Lapid Mysteries. Today I'd like to tell you about my most anticipated book of 2023, a book that I just recently finished listening to, and that is the Autobiography of Matthew Scudder by Lawrence Block. As you may already know, if you're a fan of crime fiction, Lawrence Block is a prolific and widely acclaimed writer of crime fiction who has published, I believe, over 100 novels. And he writes a number of series, including the Keller series, the Bernie Rodenbar series, and his most well-known series, the Matthew Scudder series. Matthew Scudder is a private investigator working in New York City, and he stars in 17 novels, a collection of short stories, and one novella. And now he also has an autobiography. So what does this mean, and what is the book about, and what did I think of it? Let me answer all these questions. So the idea behind this autobiography is that Matthew Scudder is in fact a real person, and that he has been working on the Matthew Scudder novels with writer Lawrence Block, and he supplies Lawrence Block with his stories, his real crime-solving stories, and Lawrence Block sort of fashions them into fictional accounts or partially fictional accounts, and in thriller format or into the format of mystery novels. And now Matthew Scudder is 85 years old, and he is looking back on his life, and he is writing this autobiography, basically for anyone who has read the books or may be interested. And even during the autobiography, there are a few segments in which he has a sort of a dialogue or a written dialogue with Lawrence Block, the writer. But the autobiography is technically, or let's say, the idea behind it is that Matthew Scudder is writing the autobiography himself, not Lawrence Block, who is only there to give the occasional advice. This is a pretty terrific idea, and something that I was quite excited about when Lawrence Block announced that this book was coming, because I'm a huge Matthew Scudder fan. Apart from my own fictional detective, the one that I write about, Matthew Scudder is my favorite fictional detective, the one that I like most as a reader. And I've read several of the Matt Scudder novels several times, listened to them in audiobook format, and I simply love this series. And I believe that the series was done mainly because Matthew Scudder ages as the series progresses, and in the last novella he is already pretty old to be running around solving crimes. And also because Lawrence Block, who I believe is also 85, I think that this autobiography was actually published on Block's 85th birthday, has made repeated promises or has stated several times that he believes he will never write another book. And since then he has already published several. So we're lucky that he has surprised himself and surprised us, the readers, as well, as a consequence. So when we first meet Matthew Scudder in the first novel of the series, he is living in a residential hotel in New York City after quitting his job as a police detective. I believe he served for 14 or 15 years on the force, and he has also left his wife and divorced her, and he is an alcoholic who basically spends most of his times in saloons, and occasionally he takes on a case as an unofficial private investigator. He doesn't write reports, he doesn't issue receipts, he just does sort of favors for people, investigative favors, and they give him gifts in return. Basically, they pay him for his services. And what the autobiography is doing is sort of filling the gaps, or filling the gap of Matthew Scudder's life until that point, until the point in which he became a private investigator, stopped being a police detective and became a private investigator. So Matthew Scudder is looking back on his life and sort of telling his story, maybe even trying to figure out for himself how he got to the point that he has, how his life has developed. And he is quite a content old man now. He lives with the love of his life, with his second wife, and he is financially secure. And he just looks back on his life and sort of tells us, the readers who already know him from the books, all that came before the series began. So we get to learn about his childhood, his parents, his young brother who died just a few days after he was born, and how this affected his parents, and where he went to school, the things that he enjoyed in school, the various jobs that he had before he became a police detective, and how at certain points he could have made other choices that would have led him to pursue a different career entirely, and how he ended up being a police detective. And it's all quite fascinating in a surprising way, because why would you be interested in just the sort of regular life of a guy who you admire as a fictional detective, as a fictional character, but whose life until that point, or at least until he became a police detective or a police officer, is quite ordinary. But Lawrence Block is one of those writers who is able to make anything interesting, any mundane topic or subject, into something fascinating, and even stuff that you may not be interested in at all become riveting when you read his writing on them. For instance, he has a different character, a guy called Keller, in a different series, who is this hitman who collects stamps, and there are chapters in that series just focused on his stamp collecting. And I'm not interested in that subject at all, but I am when I'm reading about Keller. And the same thing is true here in this autobiography. So we learn about Matthew Scudder, where he grew up, his family, his how the things that he was interested in school, for instance, Latin, and we then learn how he became a police officer, how he was partnered with his first partner, who sort of showed him the ropes of what it's like to actually be a police detective, not just in theory like they teach you in the academy, but in real life. And here the book becomes even more interesting, because you get a glimpse into sort of the gritty side of police work, and also how Scudder developed this sort of gray moral, the gray way in which he views morality and justice, as he learned the real aspects of being a police detective in the real world, outside of the classroom, on the streets of New York City. And we also learn how he was sort of viewed from early on as someone who could go far in the police department, and how he became a detective, how he met Elaine, who in the series becomes his, with whom he ends up getting married, how in the process of becoming a police detective, and in the process of him getting ever deeper into his drinking, his first marriage deteriorated, his marriage to his first wife, Anita, and the way that he mishandled being a father to his two boys. And he has a lot of, and he sort of looks back on all those things, on the mistakes that he made, on the choices that he made. And it's even regardless of everything that you know as a reader about Matthew Scudder, it's just a fascinating novel of an old man looking back on his life, reflecting on all the things that he did and all the choices that he made. And it's something quite amazing to see to see this story or this story of a life unfold before you, and you know that it's fictional, but it seems entirely real, absolutely realistic. And I will say that Matthew Scudder as a character in general has always seemed real to me, and I believe to many of the other readers as well. The series in general is very realistic. But when I think about this novel, it sort of felt like when I was reading it, like it was sort of a present, a gift to fans of Matthew Scudder, something that Lawrence Block, the author, has gifted us, to all of us who just love this series and this character. And because we get a treat that is unlike anything that I've ever read before. I've never read sort of a fictional autobiography of a character that I love so much. And I wonder now if this will become something much more common, if other writers will do so as well, will write their own autobiographies of their main characters. So Lawrence Block may be establishing a sort of subgenre within the mystery genre. And so I felt like I was receiving an unexpected present when I read this. And this is one of the, let's say, in the top 2 of my favorite novels of the year so far. The other being Dancing Aztecs by Donald E. Westlake that I previously reviewed on this channel. And I think it's a book that will stay in my mind for a long time, and I know I will return to it, let's say in a year or two, just to experience it again. While I can wholeheartedly recommend this book, The Autobiography of Matthew Scudder, I would not recommend reading it without reading the Matthew Scudder novels first, because you won't enjoy the book as much. You won't be familiar with the people that he mentions in the book, in the autobiography, because those people, those characters were previously mentioned or appeared in the novels. So this is, the Matthew Scudder series in general is my favorite mystery series as a reader. And I think that any fan of crime fiction should read this series, and any fan of beautiful, flowing, and sort of effortless writing should also read this series. And once you read that series, or at least get to book 10 of that series, then you can read the autobiography. You will find it a much richer and rewarding experience when you do so that way. So what I can say in conclusion is that this is a wonderful work of writing, a wildly creative work, and something that I just personally appreciate as a fan of this series. And I don't think I can say much more about it because I think it's quite clear how much I enjoyed and appreciated this book. So if you've already read the Matthew Scudder series, you can find a link in the description below to where you can pick up a copy of the autobiography. And if you haven't read the Matthew Scudder series, I'll leave a link in the description to where you can find all those books. And again, if you're not familiar with Matthew Scudder, put everything aside and pick up book 1 and just start reading and continue reading the series. It's simply that good.